everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I felt like pulling out my watercolors and creating a couple of cards, so that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. The stamps that I'm using are from Spellbinders, and they are winter/Christmas cards. Let me give you a look at these. This first one is called Pretty Pine Background, and it's a large stamp. It's going to cover the whole front of my A2 sized card. And then I have Holiday Group Hug, and I thought this one was so adorable. And it comes with some really nice sentiments as well. The sentiment I'm going to use on my card says, "The best part of the holidays is being together." The paper I'm using to stamp these out is called Stonehenge Aqua Hot Press, and it has a really smooth, nice texture to it. It comes gummed at two sides, so I'm going to pull out my craft knife and just kind of cut out a page. And then I can cut these down to A2 sized cards. I haven't pulled out my watercolors in a while, so it just felt like it was time. And I thought these were perfect stamps to pair with watercolors. This Stonehenge Aqua Hot Press watercolor paper is a nice bright white paper, and I love that. Oftentimes I'll use Arches watercolor paper, but that is a little more off-white. For my Holiday Group Hug stamp, I'm going to be allowing some of the white cardstock to show through, so I wanted it to be bright white. But I am going to start out with a Pretty Pine background. I'm using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a waterproof ink, so it's perfect. You can use it to emboss if you'd like, but on this card I'm just going to be stamping it out and using it as is. I did have to stamp it out several times because it is such a detailed stamp. And here it is all ready to go. I'm going to tape this down to a board using some of the yellow tape. And I have my paints and my water and my brush all ready to go. I'm going to start by putting an underpainting down first. The paint I'm using is from Daniel Smith, and this one is called Cobalt Teal Blue for the background. This is a beautiful granulating watercolor paint. So once it dries, it's not going to be perfectly smooth, and it's going to have some sparkle to it. It will have some uneven pigment, and it just looks icy to me. So I thought this would be perfect for this stamp set. I needed to pour out a little more paint in my box. I wanted the background to be darker, and of course the watercolor kind of lightens up as it dries. The paper does buckle up considerably, but that's normal for watercolor paper. However, the tape around it helps it to dry flat. So you'll know once it's dry because the paper will be perfectly flat. And here is a close-up look. It's hard to catch that granulation on camera, but it looks really sparkly and pretty. And now for the painting, I'm going to be using a lot of browns and greens. And I'm using a size 8 round brush this time, and a little cup of clean water. So I am going to speed this up a little bit. It did take a while to paint this. I'm putting a flat color down first on the pine cones, and then I will come in with a darker color or a more pigmented color, less watered down, to add some shadows. This was super easy and fun to color in. I'm going to put on some music while I paint, but of course feel free to jump ahead if you'd like. On the pine boughs and the leaves, I'm coming in with a darker color just in the centers of these to add some more dimension. It just makes it pop a little bit more. And then I'm going to allow that to dry completely before I peel up my tape. I'm peeling it away from my painting. I don't want to rip into the painting. And I find that when I tape down watercolor paper, it tears pretty easily. You'll see that there is some paper on the tape as I pull it back. But that's all right. I'm going to be cutting this down just a little bit. And I forgot to mention that the reason I taped it to this board was so that I could move it around if I needed to. But here it is, all done. Let me hold it up to the camera and give you a close-up look. To cut this down, I'm going to be using the Fluted Classics rectangles. And it will cut off the edges just a little bit. So I'll take this off camera and run it through my die cut machine. And then I'm going to use the fluted edge on a piece of blue spruce cardstock. And this will add some cute detailing around the edges. This yellow tape comes off of the colored cardstock perfectly, but it's just the watercolor paper that tears when you use low-tack tape of any kind on it. So I'll pull out my dot liner and I'm going to center this in the middle of the panel. It's going to be a very flat card. I'm not going to put much dimension on it. This looked really pretty with a piece of teal cardstock behind it as well. I had a hard time deciding what to mat it with. And now we can attach it to a top folding card base with more of the dot liner. The sentiment comes from a new set from Spellbinders and is called Wishing You Stamp and Die. I've used this in a lot of videos. It's one of my favorite sets. And there are sentiments in here that you can use all year round, but the one I chose says, "Wishing you peace and joy." I cut it out with some waterfall blue cardstock, and I heat embossed peace and joy onto a piece of black cardstock. I'm going to tuck the peace of joy sentiment behind the you sentiment. And then last I'm going to put some embellishments around the sentiment. And these are new in the Spellbinders shop. They have several sets and they are self-adhesive. So the one I'm going to use is called Fashion Spruce. But they also have Fashion Poppy, Fashion Jet, Fashion Rouge, I love those, and Fashion Cosmic. And last, Taupe. So I thought the spruce went best on it. The rouge would have looked really pretty as well. And I love that these are self-adhesive. So let me pull out my all-in-one, and I'm just going to put 3 on the front of this card, just in a triangle around the sentiment. This card will be nice and flat and easy to send out into the mail. So here is a close-up look at the finished card. And I wish that the camera would show the underpainting a little bit better because it just looks so icy and pretty and sparkly. The cobalt teal blue is a really pretty paint. And it was perfect for the underpainting because I could paint the colors right on top of it. So let's get started with card number 2. And again, I'm using the Holiday Group Hug stamp set and another piece of the Stonehenge Aqua Hot Press. Again, I'm going to be using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp this out. And I stamped it out several times to get a nice dark impression. But I want to heat emboss it this time, so I'm using some anti-static powder first. And then I can ink up the stamp. After I'm done inking, I'll pour over some clear embossing powder. This will create little wells around each segment of the stamp, and it makes watercoloring this image go so much faster because you don't have to wait for different sections of the card to dry before you continue on with your painting. And I do emboss this twice so that the embossing really stands out and contains the watercolor. It also creates nice dark lines around the images. So I'll melt this with my heat tool. And I'm being careful not to allow the heat tool to stay in one area for very long. Otherwise, the embossing powder can kind of melt into the paper. So this image does look like it has a lot to paint, but you have to keep in mind that there's a white snowman, a white polar bear, a mostly white penguin, Santa's beard and hat is white, as well as Mrs. Santa's hair. So I'm allowing a lot of the white of the paper to show through. I'll start with the skin tones first on Santa and Mrs. Santa. I'm using a little bit of dark brown and yellow ochre and a lot of water to dilute it. You can even add a little bit of red to get more of a rosy tone to it. And then I'm just using a piece of scrap watercolor paper to see if I like the way the colors are looking. And again, these will dry back more pale than what you see here on the paper. So once I have the color down that I like, I'll do a flat wash over their faces. Again, I'm going to be playing a little bit of music in the background while I paint, but let me zoom in just a little bit closer, and I'll catch you up in just a minute. So you're probably wondering why I painted my penguin purple. I don't have any grays or blacks in my little box of paints, and I was just trying to make do with what I had. So I mixed some dark blue with some really dark purple and came up with this color. I'm also using a very pale, watered down purple to shade some of the white spaces on my painting, like Santa's beard and hat and the polar bear and the snowman and so forth. I'm not going to be introducing a lot of colors on this painting. I want to reuse some of the colors like the greens and the blues. For instance, the blue on the snowman's hat and the blue on Mrs. Santa's dress. It makes the painting a little more cohesive that way if you can use the same colors instead of introducing a new color for every little thing. Now that my painting is done, I'm going to put a little bit of blue in the background. I have a really pretty paint here called Iridescent Electric Blue, and it looks really bright here, but it doesn't go down this bright. And I'm going to carefully go around these images. Again, it's pretty easy because there are embossed lines around them. And spread the paint out. I'm trying to keep the paint wet and work fast as I go so that I don't create any hard lines. But I just thought that was such a pretty blue to put behind all of these characters. At the bottom of this painting, I am going to lift up the tape so that I can add a little blue underneath the characters. I just wanted to extend that blue color just a little bit more. And then once it is completely dry, I'll peel up the yellow tape, and then I can cut out my scene. But let me give you a close-up look at the finished painting. This would be fun to do with colored pencils too, or even Copics. I'm using some essential arches, or one of the essential arches, to cut this out. And I'll take this off camera and cut it out. And here it is. This is just a new set from Spellbinders, but I like it because it's different than just the regular rectangle die sets that I use a lot. The sentiment, again, it says, "The best part of the holidays is being together." And I'm stamping that out with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'll use one of my older dies to cut this out. I use this die a lot on my sentiments. And then I can start putting this card together. This is a piece of cosmic blue cardstock. I thought it went perfectly behind this little scene of characters. So I'll put that down onto the white card base, and then the arch is going to go down flat as well. I do decide to pop up this sentiment with some foam strips. So I'll peel off the backing and just put that up at the top. I didn't want to cover any of the characters at all after all of that work. And then I'll add some poppy red beads around the sentiment. I thought this kind of brought out Santa's suit a little bit more. But Santa is definitely the central figure in this with his bright red suit. And here it is, all done. This is a really adorable stamp set. I had a lot of fun coloring this in. But I'll have all of the links to the products I use listed in the description box if you're interested in checking them out. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you were inspired. Have a wonderful crafty day. Take care. Bye.